The most dangerous thing Ethan Caldwell ever did was not lying. It was telling the truth to someone who had not earned it. He thought honesty made him clean. He thought openness made him respected. He thought if he showed people his real thoughts, his real fears, his real plans, they would see his heart and protect it. That was his first mistake. Because the world does not reward the man who reveals everything. It studies him. It memorizes him. It learns where he bends. Ethan did not lose his position because he was weak. He lost it because he became readable. He told the wrong person what he wanted. He told the wrong person what he feared. He told the wrong person why he was tired, why he was angry, why he still needed approval from people who had already shown they could not be trusted with anything delicate. And for a while, it felt safe. That is how the trap works. It never begins with an enemy. It begins with someone leaning closer, lowering their voice, and saying, "You can be honest with me." Those words sound warm. They sound harmless. They sound like a door opening. But sometimes, they are not a door. They are a collection point. A place where your secrets are gathered, labeled, and stored until the right moment. Ethan learned this too late. A few weeks after he spoke too freely, pieces of his own truth began returning to him in different forms. Not as comfort, not as loyalty, as pressure, as judgment, as quiet little comments placed at the perfect time, in front of the perfect people, with just enough accuracy to make him look unstable, needy, uncertain, easy to manage. He was not betrayed by lies. He was weakened by selective truth. That is what most honest people never understand. A lie can be denied. A rumor can be challenged. But a truth you gave away willingly carries your signature. It sounds believable because it came from you. And when someone uses your own words to shape how others see you, you feel trapped inside your own honesty. This is why being too honest makes you easy to destroy. Not because honesty is evil. Not because truth is useless. But because truth without timing is exposure. Truth without judgment is surrender. Truth without loyalty on the other side is a weapon placed in someone else's hand. Machiavelli understood that power is not only held by the person with money, title, or influence. Power belongs to the person who controls information. What is known, what is hidden, what is revealed, and when. Ethan did not know this. He spoke as if every listening ear was a safe room. He explained as if being understood would save him. He confessed as if vulnerability automatically created trust. But trust is not created by confession. Trust is proven by protection. And until someone has protected your silence, they have not earned your truth. That is the first lesson. Ethan was not destroyed because he had something to hide. He was exposed because he forgot that not everyone who asks to know you is trying to love you. Some people are trying to map you. And once they have the map, they do not need to fight you. They only need to know where to press. Ethan did not notice the shift immediately. That is what made it so dangerous. Nothing dramatic happened the next morning. No one confronted him in the hallway. No one accused him across the table. No one announced that his private words had been moved into public air. It happened slowly, cleanly, almost politely. A sentence here. A raised eyebrow there. A pause in a meeting that lasted half a second too long. A person who once listened to him with warm attention now repeated his own thoughts back to him in a colder form, as if they were evidence. That is when Ethan began to understand the hidden rule. The person who knows your story does not only know your story. They can edit your image. They can decide which part of you gets shown, which part gets buried, which detail gets exaggerated, and which motive gets attached to your name. They do not need to invent much. They only need to rearrange what you gave them. A careful enemy rarely creates a false picture from nothing. That is too easy to challenge. A careful enemy uses pieces of truth, because pieces of truth sound mature, reasonable, and difficult to deny. Ethan had told one person that he was tired of being overlooked. In his mouth, it had been honest. In their mouth, it became ambition. He had admitted that he was frustrated with people who took credit without doing the work. In his mouth, it had been clarity. In their mouth, it became resentment. He had confessed that he wanted more influence, more control over his future, more respect for the value he brought into the room. In his mouth, it had been a quiet desire. In their mouth, it became ego. This is how reputation is shaped. Not by the full truth. By the chosen fragment. Most people believe reputation is built by what they do. That is only half true. Reputation is also built by what others can convincingly say about what you do. And the more you reveal, the more material they have to work with. Ethan had spent years thinking that being transparent would protect him from being misunderstood. He believed if he explained enough, people would finally see the whole picture. But the world does not reward the whole picture. The world consumes the easiest version, the fastest version, the version that confirms what people already wanted to believe. If someone wants to see you as selfish, they will use your ambition as proof. If someone wants to see you as unstable, they will use your emotion as proof. If someone wants to see you as difficult, they will use your boundaries as proof. And if you have already given them the language, they will not even have to work hard. You handed them the script. This is why the private man survives social rooms better than the exposed man. The private man gives people less to rearrange, less to quote, less to twist, less to carry from one room to another with a concerned expression. Understand this. Concern is often the costume of control. Someone can say, "I am only worried about him," and suddenly your private struggle becomes a public discussion. Someone can say, "I am only trying to understand," and suddenly your personal motives become a topic for group interpretation. Someone can say, "I care about where his head is at," and suddenly your ambition becomes something to be monitored. The words sound clean. The function is not clean. It moves your inner world out of your hands. Ethan realized this in the old library after everyone had gone home, sitting alone under the yellow light, staring at the letter on the table. It was not a threatening letter. That would have been easier. It was worse. It was polite. It referenced things he had said in confidence. It framed them as concerns. It made him sound uncertain, emotional, too hungry for recognition. It never lied directly. That was the brilliance of it. It only selected. It only arranged. It only placed his truth under a different light. And under that light, he looked smaller. That is the danger of giving the wrong person access to your reasons. Actions can be seen from the outside. Reasons live inside you. The moment someone knows your reasons, they can explain you to other people before you get the chance to stand in the room. They can say why you did something. They can say what you really wanted. They can say what your silence meant. They can say what your confidence is hiding. They can take ownership of your inner narrative. And once someone else becomes the narrator of your motives, you have already lost position. You are no longer acting. You are being interpreted. The weak believe interpretation is harmless. It is not. Interpretation is power. The person who defines your motive can control how others receive your move. If Ethan asked for better terms, they could say he was insecure. If he stayed quiet, they could say he was resentful. If he spoke with confidence, they could say he was trying too hard. If he withdrew, they could say he was becoming difficult. Every possible action had been trapped inside a story built from his own confessions. That is what too much access creates. It does not just reveal you. It limits you. It gives people a frame, and once the frame is accepted, everything you do is forced to live inside it. Machiavelli understood that men judge by appearances because appearances are easier than truth. Most people do not investigate. They react to the version placed in front of them. So the strategic man does not only ask, "What is true?" He asks, "Who will control how the truth is presented?" Ethan had never asked that question. He thought truth could defend itself. It cannot. Truth needs timing. Truth needs rank. Truth needs a room worthy of hearing it. Without that, truth becomes raw material for someone with better instincts. So Ethan learned the second rule in silence. Never give your full story to a person who benefits from reducing you. Never explain your wounds to someone who may one day need you to look weak. Never reveal your hunger to someone who can use it to price you lower. Because the person who knows the whole story can cut it into pieces. And one piece, placed correctly, can change how the entire room sees you. By midnight, Ethan Caldwell stopped reading the letter and started reading himself. That was the harder document. The paper on the table only showed what someone had done with his words. His own memory showed why he had given those words away so easily. He saw the pattern now, not as a single mistake, but as 3 doors he had left open for years. 3 kinds of truth that should never be handed out cheaply. The first was his plan. The second was his pain. The third was his hunger for approval. Most men lose control through one of these. Ethan had offered all 3. He had spoken about where he wanted to go before he had enough strength to protect the path. He had described the position he wanted, the people he wanted to impress, the room he wanted to enter, the future he had been quietly building in his mind. He thought sharing the plan made him serious. It did not. It made him predictable. A plan revealed too early becomes a target for doubt, delay, mockery, and quiet interference. People do not need to stop you directly. They only need to weaken your certainty before your work becomes visible. They ask soft questions. Are you sure that is realistic? Do you really think they will take you seriously? Is now the right time? Have you thought about how that might look? They call it advice. Sometimes it is advice. Sometimes it is fear wearing a helpful face. Sometimes it is envy dressed as wisdom. Ethan had mistaken every question for concern. That was the first key he gave away. His direction. The second key was worse. His pain. He had told people what disappointed him, what embarrassed him, what still bothered him from years before, what kind of silence made him anxious, what kind of rejection made him overthink for days. He believed this made him deep, human, honest, and with the right person, it would have. But pain is not meant for every listener. Pain is private intelligence. It tells people where pressure works. It tells them which tone will unsettle you, which absence will make you chase, which criticism will make you explain, which memory will make you smaller in your own eyes. The ordinary man confuses being known with being safe. They are not the same thing. To be known by the wrong person is to be handled by someone who has studied your hidden buttons. Ethan remembered how easily certain people could shift his mood. One sentence, one look, one delayed response. He thought they were powerful. They were not. They were informed. He had trained them by telling them too much. But the third key was the most dangerous because it made the first two possible. Approval. Ethan wanted to be seen as honorable, reliable, worth choosing. He wanted people to say he was different from the shallow men in the room. He wanted his honesty to be noticed, almost rewarded. That hunger made him talk when silence would have protected him. It made him explain when a simple answer would have been enough. It made him reveal the emotional reason behind decisions that only needed a practical reason. This is where most honest people deceive themselves. They say they are being transparent because it is the right thing to do. Often, they are being transparent because they cannot stand being misread. They are not serving truth. They are begging for a cleaner image. And the moment someone knows you cannot tolerate being misunderstood, they own a handle on you. They can accuse you lightly and watch you over-explain. They can question your motive and watch you perform your innocence. They can withhold approval and watch you offer more access just to regain warmth. That is not honesty. That is dependence in a polished suit. Ethan sat back in the old leather chair and saw the three keys clearly now. Plan. Pain. Approval. Your plan shows where you are going. Your pain shows where you can be touched. Your approval hunger shows how cheaply you can be pulled back into the room. Together, they form the map of your inner government. Give that map to the wrong person, and they do not need to control your life from the outside. They can influence the decisions you think are your own. They can make you hesitate before acting. They can make you defend before being accused. They can make you seek permission without anyone openly demanding it. This is why the disciplined man separates truth from access. He may be honest, but he does not make his entire mind public property. He may speak clearly, but he does not turn every private motive into community material. He may admit facts, but he does not surrender the architecture underneath them. If someone asks about his plan, he gives them the next visible step, not the entire road. If someone asks about his pain, he gives them composure, not a guided tour through every wound. If someone asks why he wants more, he does not apologize for ambition. He lets the question die in the air. Ethan finally understood that secrecy is not always dishonesty. Sometimes it is structure. A house without doors is not more honest than a fortress. It is only easier to enter. And from that night forward, Ethan decided that no one would receive all three keys again. Not because he had become colder. Because he had become harder to read, harder to price, harder to move. The world can only use what it can access. So the first act of power is simple. Close the doors that never should have been open. The next morning, Ethan Caldwell walked through the city with a quiet anger he did not show. The streets were already awake. Coffee shops full. Office windows glowing. Cars moving through the gray light, like everyone knew exactly where they belonged. But Ethan was not thinking about the letter anymore. He was thinking about the impulse behind every confession he had ever made. The need to be seen as good. The need to be understood before he was judged. The need to explain the clean intention behind every hard decision. That was the part that disgusted him most. He had called it honesty for years, but under the surface it was fear. Not fear of being caught. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of standing in a room while someone carried the wrong version of him in their mind. and that fear had made him obedient. This is the twist most people never want to face. They are not always honest because they love truth. They are honest because they cannot tolerate social tension. They confess because silence makes them feel guilty. They explain because disapproval makes them panic. They reveal because they are trying to buy acceptance with access. That is not virtue. That is negotiation. Ethan saw it clearly now. Every time someone questioned his motive, he rushed to prove purity. Every time someone looked disappointed, he gave more background. Every time someone said, "I thought you were different," he opened another private room inside himself and invited them to inspect it. He thought he was defending his character. He was actually putting his character on trial. And once you accept the trial, you accept the judge. That is how social control enters through a polite door. It does not need to command you. It only needs to make you feel accused. Then your own need for approval does the rest. A person says, "I just do not understand why you would do that," and suddenly you are explaining for 5 minutes. A person says, "That seems kind of selfish," and suddenly you are handing over emotional context they never earned. A person says, "I guess I do not really know you anymore," and suddenly you are working to restore their comfort instead of protecting your position. This is not honesty. This is fear wearing a moral costume. The powerful do not rush to correct every false impression. They understand that some people use misunderstanding as a leash. They pretend confusion so you will reveal more. They act disappointed so you will soften. They question your heart so you will surrender your reasoning. But a man who can survive being misunderstood becomes difficult to govern. Ethan had never been that man. Not yet. He had been too available to interpretation, too eager to be seen fairly, too quick to clean up every shadow around his name. But the world does not respect a man who keeps begging it to read him correctly. It respects the man who can stand still while others. Guess. That morning, when someone at work asked him why he had been so quiet lately, Ethan felt the old instinct rise. It came fast. A full explanation formed in his chest. He wanted to say he had been thinking. He wanted to say he was not upset. He wanted to say he was simply becoming more careful, more private, more focused. But then he saw the trap. Not every question deserves the whole room of truth behind it. So he answered with calm precision. "I have been paying closer attention." That was all. No apology. No performance. No emotional tour. The other person waited, expecting more. Ethan gave nothing. And in that small silence, something changed. Not outside him. Inside him. He felt the discomfort of being partially unknown, and for the first time, he did not try to fix it. This is where power begins. Not in domination. Not in noise. Not in trying to impress strangers with how transparent you can be. Power begins when you stop treating every uncomfortable pause like a debt you owe. The world trained you to fill silence. To clarify. To soften. To make yourself easy to digest. But an easy man is a usable man. He can be moved by guilt, flattery, suspicion, and the threat of disapproval. The moment he feels unseen, he performs. The moment he feels misread, he confesses. The moment someone withdraws warmth, he pays for it with more access. Ethan had paid that price too many times. He had mistaken emotional exposure for strength because people applauded it when it benefited them. They told him he was real. They told him he was open. They told him they valued his honesty. Of course they did. His openness made their work easier. They never had to wonder what he wanted. They never had to guess what hurt him. They never had to earn the deeper parts of him. He brought them out voluntarily and called it character. But character is not measured by how much you reveal. It is measured by what you can protect without needing applause. By noon, Ethan understood the rule that would separate the old version of him from the new one. You do not owe everyone access just because they ask with a soft voice. You do not owe a full explanation just because someone feels entitled to. 1. You do not owe emotional evidence to prove you are a decent man. Let them wonder. Let them misread what they were never qualified to interpret. Let them sit with the silence they expected you to fill. The man who needs constant approval will keep confessing until nothing private remains. The man who can endure misunderstanding becomes unreadable. And the unreadable man is no longer controlled by the need to be liked. By late afternoon, Ethan Caldwell noticed the next trap because it did not look like a trap at all. It looked like concern. It had a calm face, a lowered voice, and the careful tone people use when they want access without admitting they are asking for it. Someone leaned near his desk and said, "I am only asking because I care." A month ago, Ethan would have relaxed. He would have mistaken the softness for safety. He would have answered with the full truth, because the sentence sounded kind. But kindness is not proven by tone. Loyalty is not proven by concern. And curiosity is not purified just because it arrives wearing a gentle expression. This is what most honest people never learn. The most expensive information you give away is rarely taken from you by force. It is invited out of you by warmth. A hard question makes you defensive. A soft question makes you open. That is why soft questions are more dangerous. They do not attack your boundary. They make you feel guilty for having one. Ethan turned toward the person and saw the old pattern in motion. The question was not direct enough to be challenged, but it was personal enough to extract something useful. How are you really feeling about everything? What do you think is going to happen next? Are you upset with anyone? Do you still trust them? What are you planning to do now? Each question sounded harmless by itself. Together, they were a net. Not a conversation. A collection. And this is the quiet skill of people who gather information. They rarely ask the true question first. They circle it. They offer sympathy. They make a small confession so you feel pressure to make a bigger one. They say they are on your side before you have seen them protect anyone under pressure. They do not demand your secrets. They create an atmosphere where withholding them feels rude. Ethan remembered how easily he used to fall for this. Someone would say, "You can tell me," and he would treat the sentence like a contract. Someone would say, "I will not judge you," and he would forget that judgment does not always appear immediately. Sometimes judgment waits. Sometimes it smiles today and speaks tomorrow. Sometimes it stores your words until they become useful in another room. The dangerous person is not always the one who looks hostile. Sometimes the dangerous person is the one who makes you feel unusually safe before they have earned that effect. That is how access works. It begins emotionally before it becomes informational. First, they make you feel seen. Then they make you feel understood. Then they make you feel obligated to be transparent. And once transparency becomes the price of connection, you start paying with pieces of yourself. Ethan had paid before. He had confused emotional relief with wisdom. There is a strange comfort in telling everything. For a few minutes, the pressure leaves your chest. The other person nods. They look serious. They say, "That makes sense." You feel lighter. But power does not care how light you felt after confessing. Power cares who left the conversation knowing more about you than you know about them. That is the imbalance. That is the hidden transaction. You gave them your motives, your frustrations, your doubts, your next move. And what did they give you in return? A sympathetic face. A few warm words. Maybe a promise that the conversation would stay private. But promises are cheap when there is no cost for breaking them. Ethan looked at the person near his desk and did something the old Ethan would not have done. He did not punish them. He did not accuse them. He did not explain that he was protecting himself now. That would have been another leak. He simply reduced the information. He said, "I am still thinking it through." That was all. They waited. He waited longer. They tried again. "I mean, you must have some idea where you stand." Ethan looked at them calmly and said, "I will know more when there is something worth saying." The silence after that was small, but it revealed everything. Their face changed for less than a second. Not anger. Not disappointment exactly. More like the discomfort of a person who had reached for a door and found it locked. That is when Ethan understood the test. People who respect your boundary do not need to understand every detail behind it. People who want access will often act wounded when access is denied. They will make your privacy seem like suspicion. They will make your restraint seem like arrogance. They will make your silence seem like a personal insult. But privacy is not an insult. Privacy is rank. It decides who gets close and who remains outside. By evening, as Ethan walked back toward the old library through streets washed in cold rain, he carried a new rule with him. Never answer a soft question just because it is soft. Never mistake a calm voice for a clean motive. Never confuse being listened to with being protected. The world is full of people who are not asking because they care. They are asking because information gives them position. And once you understand that, you stop rewarding every warm tone with your inner world. That night, Ethan Caldwell returned to the old library and locked the door behind him. The rain tapped against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. He placed his phone face down on the wooden table, took the letter from his coat pocket, and set it beside a worn leather notebook he had not opened in years. For the first time, he did not ask who had disappointed him. He asked what he had failed to understand. The answer was colder than blame. Information is not neutral. Information changes position. Information decides who waits, who moves, who feels secure, who feels exposed, who speaks with confidence, and who speaks while trying not to look afraid. Ethan had treated information as something honest people simply shared. Machiavelli would have laughed at that innocence. In any room where ambition exists, information is not conversation. It is territory. It is access. It is leverage. The person who knows what you want can predict where you will bend. The person who knows what you fear can predict what you will avoid. The person who knows what you are planning can prepare before you arrive. The person who knows what you regret can shape how you defend yourself. This is why the careless man is always playing from behind. He thinks the game begins when people openly disagree with him. It does not. The game begins when someone quietly learns enough to estimate his next move. Ethan opened the notebook and wrote one sentence across the top of the page. What they know, they can use. Not always with cruelty. Not always with bad intentions. Sometimes they use it through pressure. Sometimes through advice. Sometimes through concern. Sometimes through silence. A manager who knows you are desperate for promotion does not have to offer you more. A friend who knows you fear exclusion does not have to chase you. A rival who knows you need to be seen as honorable does not have to defeat you directly. They only need to put you in a position where you feel forced to prove yourself. And once you are proving yourself, you are no longer free. You are responding to a frame someone else created. That is the hidden cost of unnecessary honesty. It gives other people the frame before you have chosen the move. Ethan thought about the people who seemed calm in important rooms. They were not always smarter. They were not always stronger. They simply revealed less. They did not rush to clarify their desires. They did not decorate every decision with emotional context. They did not hand strangers the reason behind every silence. Because the disciplined person knows that every extra detail creates another handle. A handle for questions. A handle for judgment. A handle for negotiation. A handle for control. The old Ethan believed that saying more made him look sincere. The new Ethan understood that saying more often makes you cheaper. Valuable things are not displayed on the sidewalk. They are kept behind glass, behind doors, behind a system of access. Your mind should be no different. This does not mean you become false. Falsehood is clumsy. Falsehood creates debt. Falsehood forces you to remember what mask you wore yesterday. A strategic man does not need to lie when silence can do the work cleanly. He simply stops treating every question as a command. He stops treating every listener as a judge. He stops treating every moment of curiosity as a sacred invitation. He understands that privacy is not a wall against the world. It is the architecture of self-respect. Ethan looked at the letter again and saw its real lesson. Someone had taken what he revealed and used it to position themselves as the interpreter of his mind. That could only happen because he had given them too much language, too many motives, too many fears, too many unfinished thoughts. So he made a new rule. Facts can be shared when necessary. Feelings must be earned. Plans must be protected until motion has made them real. Weakness must never be placed in the hands of someone who has not already shown restraint. And ambition should never be explained to people who benefit from keeping you small. In the world Ethan was entering, the man who controlled information controlled the room before he entered it. He did not need to dominate. He needed to manage access. He needed to understand who was safe for facts, who was safe for strategy, who was safe for emotion, and who was safe for nothing more than a polite sentence and a closed face. Most people collapse these categories. They tell private things to temporary people. They give emotional truth to people who only earned casual conversation. They reveal plans to people who have never celebrated their progress. Then they act shocked when their own words return with a different tone. Ethan was done being shocked. Shock belongs to the naive. Observation belongs to the powerful. He closed the notebook and felt the first clean edge of control. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs applause. The private kind. The kind that makes a man slower, quieter, harder to corner. From that night forward, Ethan would still tell the truth. But only with timing. Only with rank. Only with purpose. Because truth is not less valuable when it is protected. It becomes more valuable. And a man who protects his truth protects the one thing the world is always trying to enter first. His mind. The next day, Ethan Caldwell did not try to become mysterious. That would have been childish. A costume. A performance for people he still wanted to impress. Real privacy does not announce itself. It changes the speed of your mouth. It changes the weight of your pauses. It changes what you allow to leave your mind before it has earned the right to exist in the open. Ethan understood this as he sat in a conference room 20 stories above the wet streets, watching people speak too quickly around a polished table. They were not talking. They were leaking. One person revealed frustration while pretending to offer strategy. Another revealed insecurity while trying to sound confident. Another revealed loyalty to whoever seemed most powerful in the room. The words were different, but the pattern was the same. Everyone wanted to be understood. Everyone wanted to be seen as reasonable. Everyone wanted to control the impression they were making, so they gave away more than the moment required. Ethan had been one of them. Not anymore. He began using a new protocol, simple enough to remember, sharp enough to change everything. Before he answered, he asked himself 3 questions in silence. Has this person earned the truth? How much do they actually need to know? Can this answer be used to limit me later? Most people never pause long enough to ask even one. That is why they live exposed. They treat conversation like a reflex instead of a battlefield of access. Someone asks, and they answer. Someone doubts, and they explain. Someone pushes, and they open. But the disciplined man places a gate between the question and the truth. In that gate, he becomes free. Ethan practiced it when his manager asked what he thought about the recent tension in the department. The old Ethan would have given analysis, emotion, names, history, motives, all of it carefully framed to sound fair. The new Ethan gave only what the room deserved. There are a few patterns worth watching before any conclusion is useful. Clean. True. Limited. No names. No emotional offering. No hidden map of his alliances. The manager looked at him for more. Ethan did not provide more. That is the first layer of the protocol. Say less than you can. Not less than truth requires, but less than ego wants. Ego wants to display intelligence. Ego wants to prove depth. Ego wants the room to know you saw everything before everyone else did. But every display has a cost. When you show all your insight, people learn how you think. When you show all your concern, people learn what you value. When you show all your anger, people learn where to return when they need a reaction. Say enough to be clear, not enough to be owned. The second layer is to speak slower than your emotion wants. Speed reveals pressure. Fast answers often come from fear, approval hunger, or the need to recover control. Slow answers create distance. They tell the room that you are not being dragged by the rhythm of the question. Ethan noticed this during lunch, when a colleague asked whether he trusted the person who had been gathering opinions behind closed doors. The question was casual. The timing was not. Ethan took 1 second longer than felt natural. That second did the work. It cooled the impulse. It separated observation from reaction. Then he said, I trust patterns more than statements. Nothing more. The answer did not feed gossip. It did not expose resentment. It did not place him on a side. It revealed a principle, not a wound. That is the third layer. Speak in principles when details would make you vulnerable. Details invite debate. Principles establish position. Details can be quoted. Principles are harder to twist. A weak man says, I am upset because they ignored me last week and then acted like nothing happened. A stronger man says, I pay attention to consistency. One reveals injury. The other reveals standard. One begs to be understood. The other quietly sets rank. Ethan began replacing explanations with standards. Instead of saying why he needed space, he said, I focus better with fewer interruptions. Instead of explaining why he would not share unfinished plans, he said, I discuss things when they are ready. Instead of defending his silence, he said, I prefer to listen before I decide. Each sentence closed a door without slamming it. This is important. The private man does not need drama. Drama is another form of exposure. He does not declare boundaries like a revolutionary giving a speech. He lives them until others adjust. The fourth layer is to give different people different levels of truth. The cashier at the coffee shop does not need your life story. The friendly colleague does not need your private doubts. The temporary ally does not need your long-term strategy. The person who enjoys being near your weakness does not need your pain. Rank your access. Casual people get facts. Useful people get coordination. Proven people get context. Loyal people, rare loyal people, may earn emotion. But even then, slowly. Over time. Under pressure. Most people reverse this. They give emotion first and wait for loyalty later. That is how they become disappointed. Loyalty must come before access, not after. By evening, Ethan walked back into the old library, not as a man hiding from the world, but as a man returning to himself. He had not lied once. He had not performed coldness. He had not punished anyone with silence. He had simply stopped making his inner life available on demand. And the effect was immediate. People leaned in more carefully. They chose their questions more precisely. They realized, without being told, that Ethan Caldwell was no longer a room with every light on and every door open. He had become layered, polite on the surface, precise in speech, slow to reveal, impossible to rush. That is what the careless call distance. That is what the disciplined call control. The change did not stay hidden for long. It never does. When a man who used to be easy to read becomes selective, the room feels it before anyone names it. Ethan Caldwell noticed it first in the way people paused around him. The same voices that once moved through his life without resistance now tested the edges of his silence. They asked the same questions, but their tone had changed. There was less curiosity now and more entitlement. One colleague asked why he had become so guarded. Another joked that he was acting mysterious. Someone else said, "I just feel like you are not being honest with us anymore." There it was. The accusation every private person must learn to survive. When people lose access, they often call it dishonesty. Not because you lied. Not because you betrayed them. Because you stopped giving them the level of information they had grown comfortable receiving for free. Ethan felt the old instinct rise again, smaller this time, but still alive. He wanted to explain that he was not hiding anything harmful. He wanted to prove he had not changed in some dark way. He wanted to reassure them that he was still reasonable, still decent, still the same man beneath the quieter surface. But he saw the trap before stepping into it. The demand for reassurance was just another request for access. If he explained why he was private, he would be making his privacy public. If he defended his silence, he would be turning silence into another confession. So he did what the old Ethan could never do. He let the accusation stand without feeding it. He said, "I am simply more careful with what I discuss." That was all. The words were plain, but the boundary inside them was iron. This is where most people fail. They learn to speak less, but they cannot endure the social pressure that follows. They can close the door, but they panic when someone knocks. They can withhold the truth, but they collapse when someone says, "Why are you being so secretive?" Understand the game. People who benefited from your openness will rarely celebrate your restraint. They will not say, "I enjoyed having too much access to you, and now I resent losing it." They will say you changed. They will say you are cold. They will say you are difficult to understand. They will make your privacy sound like a flaw, because that is the only way to shame the door back open. Ethan saw this clearly at the end of the day, when he was invited into a small conversation after work. 3 people, low voices, paper cups of coffee, the kind of setting that appears harmless because it is informal. One of them asked if he still trusted the team. Another asked if he was planning to leave. A third smiled and said, "Come on, Ethan, we are just trying to know where you stand." That sentence revealed the entire purpose. They did not want honesty. They wanted placement. They wanted to know where he stood so they could decide where to stand in relation to him. This is what many questions are really asking. Are you safe for me? Are you useful to me? Are you against me? Can I predict you? Can I move before you move? The words sound social. The function is strategic. Ethan did not resent them for this. Resentment would have made him sloppy. He simply recognized the transaction. Then he declined to overpay. He said, "I stand where the work is clear and the motives are clean." A principle again. Not a confession. Not a side. Not a map. The conversation lost its easy rhythm because the rhythm had depended on him giving more than he owed. That silence did not hurt him. It protected him. Later, walking back through the rain toward the old library, Ethan understood the deeper law. When someone demands your full truth, pay attention to what happens when you give them less. That reaction tells you more than their question ever could. A safe person may be curious, but they respect the closed door. An unsafe person becomes offended by the lock. They act as if your boundary is an accusation. They make you responsible for their discomfort. They turn your discretion into evidence against your character. But their discomfort is not your emergency. Their curiosity is not your master. Their disappointment is not a command. This is how access reveals itself. The people who deserve more of you do not try to punish you for protecting yourself. They do not require a full tour of your mind to treat you with respect. They do not confuse closeness with ownership. Everyone else should remain outside. Not hated. Not attacked. Simply outside. The private man does not need enemies to build walls. He needs standards. Ethan sat again in the library as the evening darkened, and for the first time, the closed door behind him felt less like isolation and more like rank. Outside that door were voices, opinions, guesses, and appetites. Inside was stillness. A table. A notebook. A mind no longer available on demand. He had not become dishonest. He had become sovereign. And sovereignty always offends those who preferred you accessible. Let them be offended. Offense is often the sound people make when their old access expires. By the final night, Ethan Caldwell no longer looked at honesty the way he once had. He did not see it as a door that should always be open. He saw it as a flame. Useful, clean, necessary, but dangerous when carried into the wrong wind. The old Ethan believed that telling the full truth made him noble. The new Ethan understood that nobility without judgment becomes exposure. He had not become a liar. That was the shallow interpretation, the kind weak minds use when they cannot understand restraint. He had become selective. There is a difference. A liar changes the truth to escape consequence. A disciplined man protects the truth until the right person, the right room, and the right moment exist. One is cowardice. The other is control. Ethan sat beside the rain-dark window of the old library, the same letter resting on the table, but it no longer had the same weight. At first, it had felt like proof that someone had taken from him. Now it felt like a receipt for a lesson he had paid for with years of careless access. He had paid with over-explaining. He had paid with confessions to temporary people. He had paid with the childish belief that being fully known would make him fully safe. It did not. The world does not protect you just because it understands you. Sometimes understanding only makes you easier to place, easier to predict, easier to price. And a man who can be priced too easily will always be negotiated down. Ethan folded the letter slowly and placed it inside the notebook, not as a wound, but as evidence. Evidence that the old version of him had been too available. Evidence that the softest conversations can become the most expensive. Evidence that truth, when given without rank, does not create intimacy. It creates access. And access is never neutral. From that point forward, Ethan would still answer when answers were necessary. He would still speak clearly when clarity served the mission. He would still be honest with people who had proven steadiness over time, not through charm, not through promises, not through warm phrases, but through behavior under pressure. That was the new standard. Not who smiled. Not who asked gently. Not who said, "You can trust me." The test was simpler and colder. Who protected what they already knew. Who did not use closeness as currency. Who did not punish a closed door. Who remained respectful when they received less than they wanted. Those people were rare. And because they were rare, they would be treated as rare. Everyone else would receive courtesy, not confession. Politeness, not the private map. Surface truth, not the architecture underneath. This is how a man stops being handled. He does not announce a transformation. He does not post about boundaries. He does not tell the room he is becoming harder to read. He simply changes the terms of access. He lets casual people remain casual. He lets curious people remain outside. He lets entitled people reveal themselves against the locked door. He no longer mistakes pressure for intimacy or questions for concern. And when someone demands more than they have earned, he does not become angry. Anger reveals investment. He becomes still. He becomes precise. He becomes impossible to rush. Ethan rose from the table and looked at his reflection in the dark window. Behind him, the library glowed with candlelight. In front of him, the city moved under rain, full of open mouths, eager ears, polished smiles, and rooms where people traded private things as if they had no cost. He knew he would return to those rooms. He would sit at those tables. He would hear the same soft invitations. Tell me what you really think. Be honest with me. You can say it. I will not judge you. But now those sentences no longer opened him. They alerted him. They reminded him that every conversation has a price, and the man who does not know the price often pays with himself. The old Ethan wanted to be transparent enough to be loved. The new Ethan wanted to be disciplined enough to be respected. Love that requires total exposure is not love. It is appetite. Respect allows distance. Respect does not need every room unlocked. Respect understands that a private man is not empty. He is protected, and protection is not dishonesty. It is the structure that keeps truth from becoming a tool in careless hands. So remember this. Be honest, but never be naked. Tell the truth, but do not throw your inner world into every open hand. Let your words have weight because they are not cheap. Let your silence have meaning because it is not fear. Let people earn the deeper rooms of you slowly, through conduct, through loyalty, through time. The world does not need your full story to respect you. And the people who demand it too quickly are often the same people who would not know how to guard it. Ethan turned from the window, closed the notebook, and blew out the candle. The room fell into darkness, but he did not feel hidden. He felt restored, because the man who protects his truth is not running from the world. He is refusing to be owned by it.